My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm Cloud Hired.
So, I'm Cloud Hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm Cloud Hired.
Because of Google Architect program, I am Cloud Hired. See!
I am Cloud Hired. Thank you, Mike and the GlowCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. I am Michael Gibbs. I am joined here with Mark Milovanovic, and we're here to answer your tech career questions. Maybe your goal is to become a cloud architect. Maybe your goal is to become a network architect or a security architect or an enterprise architect or an AI architect or even a network engineer, and we want to help you get there. Personally, I've been working in technology for over 25 years, and I've helped others just like you get their first tech job, get promoted in tech, get a raise in tech for more than 2 decades, and I want to help you. I currently have people that I've worked with that work for Apple and Amazon and Cisco and IBM and Google and Microsoft, Palo Alto Networks, Zscalers, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, JP Morgan Chase, Barclays Bank, LeaseWeb, any prestigious organization through the world, people I've trained to work there, working there. And I know when I kicked off my career 25 years ago, I made a lot of mistakes. And why did I make these mistakes? Because I just didn't have guidance. And these mistakes cost a lot of time, effort, and money. And when I finally got the good guidance that I needed to be successful, and it was a VP of architecture with the world's largest internet service provider, and I said, what do I need to do to become a phenomenal architect? I made it to principal architect status in less than 2 years. And that's why we're here, Mark and I, so we can save you decades of mistakes, so we can get you to the goal much faster by using the right method, by giving you a roadmap. So bring us your questions. Before we begin our discussion today, I'd like to remind you about a couple of things that I'm pretty excited about. The first one is at the end of this month, we have a completely free AWS Advanced Networking Bootcamp. It is going to be taught by 3 Cisco certified internet experts, as well as other network engineers and network architects. Together, the team that's going to teach this course has over 60 years networking experience. And when you know networking the way the experts do, they're going to make it so easy for you to understand this very simple AWS Advanced Networking and its good foundation intro to networking knowledge, the AWS Advanced Networking, every cloud architect should know. Because at the end of the day, all cloud computing is some running space in somebody else's network in the data center. So it's completely free. My team popped the link in the chat box in the description of this video. Go sign up, check it out, and learn with us. I also want to tell you that tomorrow we have our How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. And in this completely free webinar, which is on Zoom, you can come. We'll go over the cloud architect role. We'll talk about what we do, which is very different than in some of the silly job descriptions that we see out there, which are more of a comedy routine than an architecture job description. And people don't do that in these architecture jobs, regardless of the job description. We will go over the skills that you need. We'll go over what hiring managers desire in a fantastic architect. We'll talk about how to get seen directly by the hiring manager so you don't get auto-rejected by the what do you call it? The HR people, the internal people, when you send their resume and they just auto reject you unless you've got 50 years experience, 3 Olympic gold medals, that kind of thing. So we'll teach you how to get hired and everything you need to know, and we'll go over the entire skill list. And of course, it'll be on Zoom. So you can ask questions to me and my team. We can have a face-to-face conversation. We can assess you if you're ready to be interviewing or going on a job. We can assess any gaps in your knowledge, and it's all free, courtesy of GoCloud Careers. And there's honestly one last thing I'm going to mention. I woke up this morning, and there were 76 emails in our corporate inbox asking us to extend the sale on our Generative AI Architect program. And that was before I woke up, and we've gotten so many today that the team and I have decided to temporarily extend our 50% off pre-sale Generative AI Architect program. First class started today, which was more of a meet and greet. And, you know, David Lithicum did his thing, and the students were so happy. I've already got so many thank you emails. So if you want to take advantage of that pre-sale, take advantage of it. It won't be long that we're probably going to extend it, but just give you a chance to in case you missed out on the opportunity. So before we begin, Mark, do you want to say anything? Mark is my Chief Technology Officer. He is a Cisco certified expert and a network architect as well. And Mark's going to here to help me. Mark, why don't you say hello?
I wanted to thank everybody for taking time out of your day. We always appreciate you guys being able to join us. We are glad that we have the opportunity to provide you this service, especially to be able to give back to the community. As Mike pointed out, and we always talk behind the scenes too, we wish that we had this type of service available to us for free at that time, but that's just how the cards fell. We hope that you all take advantage of that and ask us your questions, and hopefully the suggestions, or if you want to call it advice that we give you all, might be of some use to you all. So let's get started with the questions. Do we have any questions? And don't be shy about asking the questions. There's no such thing as stupid questions, like I always say.
Absolutely not. Tu and Hughes, great first class for the Generative AI program this morning. Tu and Hughes, I am so thankful to hear that. I'm super excited about the program. You know, we've been doing our thing in education for a while now. I've spent 2 decades helping others. David Lithicum has been teaching forever, and he's been involved in AI since the late 80s. So we're super excited about it, and thanks so much.
Our first question from Cloud Station. In your experience, what are the key differences between working as a cloud architect in a large enterprise versus a startup or small organization?
Okay, Cloud Station, let's kind of answer this methodically. And there's an exception for the startup, but the small organization. Cloud architects work in large enterprises. Small businesses do not need to hire people to go out there and to understand the organization's vision 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, because small businesses typically don't have a vision 20 years from now. The architect needs to understand the business processes. And, you know, small businesses, they're just trying to figure it out on their own. They don't necessarily have established processes to work with 5 and 10 and 50,000 plus people. Small organizations don't typically have a lot of technology needs, and therefore they don't need architects to actually optimize the technology and design the technology to optimize business performance. So all in all, we cloud architects work for enterprises. We either work for technology companies such as IBM and Microsoft and Cisco and Google and Nutanix, you know, for an example, or we work for the end user, like a global bank or a global retailer or a big healthcare provider or internet service provider. So, you know, that's typically where we work as architects. And here's the good news. They have the budget to pay us. Small businesses don't have a lot of money. Big businesses have a lot of money. And organizations need the people to truly optimize their business with technology. Small business just isn't that big. If you've got 30 people or 50 people or 100 people in an organization, you don't need somebody to design $500 million of technology. You just don't in most cases. I mean, occasionally you do, but there's that. Now, startup. You know, there are times where a cloud architect would work in a startup, and here's what I mean. If you're dealing with a tech company that's a startup, they're going to say, well, we have zero money right now, and we can get some free cloud credits from a cloud provider. They might actually be there to actually design the systems for the small business. which you got to think about that and keep it into the back of your mind. So they could potentially be doing not cloud architect work at a startup. They could potentially be doing some design engineering in a startup and potentially some engineering. Because again, small businesses, unless they're huge tech companies with billion-dollar budgets or multi-hundreds of million-dollar budgets, just don't need cloud architects. Same thing for network architects. Same thing for enterprise architects. Same thing for security architects. We really stay out of the small businesses. We work for the big businesses. And the only time an architect would consult to a small business would be, let's say you worked at an Amazon and they had a small business division, or if you worked at a value-added reseller or a managed service provider, they will hire architects that kind of work with those little small businesses. But typically speaking, the bigger the business you work with, the more you'll be paid, the more sophistication you need, the more business acumen, leadership skills, sales skills, executive presence, stakeholder management, and vendor management. So all in all, CloudStation, architects don't work in small business. We work in big, giant businesses.
Yeah. And think about the logic behind it. You're being brought in because of complexity. Complexity from technology, complexity from a business perspective. When you look at a smaller company or even a startup, they don't have as much complexity yet. So it's going to take some time to rev up and get to the point where they might need somebody like you to bring on the team and be able to afford you. So that's kind of like the ground rule there. There's always, exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, the more complex, the more expertise a particular organization requires. Simple example is, if you simply have one internet service provider, you're not going to need a network architect for it. You may not even need an experienced network engineer. No. You can get by with just having a system administrator or network administrator to manage your internal network. So that's the same thing with architects from cloud and so forth. The bigger the complexity, the more your expertise is required. Wonderful question. From Cloud Doctor, how difficult are architect interviews? What do we prepare for?
Cloud Doctor, let me answer that. If you are a capable, qualified architect with extremely good skills, architect interviews are very easy. They're fun and they're relaxing. If you are not prepared for a cloud architect interview and maybe have admin skills or engineering skills, but not architect skills, then it's going to be a miserable experience. Now, I do have a completely free guide, which you can download, which will teach you how to prepare for the interview. But here's the thing. You have to have the skills. So if I have an architect and I ask them, and I tell them, for example, an organization has a 3.75% weighted average cost of capital, how would they use that, whether to determine whether to build a private cloud or use a public cloud? And they don't understand what that means. I can't hire them. If I ask an architect, what do I need to do to make a hybrid multi-cloud work? And they can't answer it, I can't hire them. If I tell somebody I've got 3 different direct connections to AWS and I want to load share without getting out of order packets, and they don't understand what I mean, and they think that I need to use a load balancer versus understanding BGP, I can't hire them. If I ask someone how to get around the slow performance of block storage, because even though in a certification they call it fast, it's horribly slow in terms of both throughput and latency compared to what I can actually put on the server, and they don't know, I can't hire them. If I interview someone for an architecture interview and I make them give a presentation and they can't give a presentation properly, I can't hire them. If they lack the sales skills, the executive presence, the emotional intelligence, I can't hire them. It doesn't matter to me how many years of hands-on engineering skills they have, because that doesn't correlate to the architecture. So assuming you've got the good skills, it's really good. And it's not like an engineering interview. A lot of engineering interviews, I think David Lithicum uses the term stump the chump. And that's really when somebody goes out there and they give you a bunch of ridiculous questions to see what you can do. Like asking Mark, what's the difference between a type 7 LSA and a type 5 LSA, when they're pretty much the same thing. But, that's where you start getting into the goofiness. But for an architect, I'm going to ask someone, how do I design this? What things do you consider? Tell me about the types of business problems you've solved and what you used to solve them, and what was the measurable business impact of it. And if you're an architect, it is simple. My students in the Cloud Architect program know how to do this because they're there. Now, I still think everybody should get interview training. I really, really do. And we provide interview training in all of our programs, but we've also got special interview training. And why interview training? And why do most people make the biggest mistakes? They get all these certifications, and at the end of the day, if they got interview training, they could probably raise their salary more than getting 30 certifications. And here's why. In every good tech job we're dealing with, there's a difference between the top paid person and the bottom paid person. In an architect job, it's typically $200,000 difference between the bottom and top paid architect for a role, like a principal architect role. They range from, say, 400 to 600. And if you're not there and you don't have those skills, you're not going to earn as much. A good interview can get a base salary to be 30% higher. So there's that. And that's why I recommend interview training. Plus, if you're one of those borderline candidates, like it's your first architect job, fresh out of training, if you've got better interview skills, the employer is more likely to say, yes, I'll take a chance on this person. So I definitely recommend interview training. So what do you need to prepare for, Cloud Doctor? Well, you have to be able to show how you're going to assist that hiring manager in their job. And if you understand that the hiring manager has work that needs to be done, and a lot of that includes, architectures that need to be designed, revenue targets that those architects need to help the account team sell, and measurable business objectives, things that you may do. Those are those things that they're judged on. The performance of their team, the happiness on their team, the way the harmony on their team, the way people perceive their team, and the amount of work that's done, and the amount of revenue they create. If you're on that architect team and you can show that you can close sales by demonstrating good sales skills in the way you communicate, if you can demonstrate a level of emotional intelligence, they know they're going to raise the energy on the team. If you can show some degree of executive presence, they know that people are going to take you seriously. So what is it that hiring managers really want? They want someone that can do the actual job. Just can't hire people for these kind of jobs without the skills. I'm just not going to hire somebody from the mailroom. I'm not going to hire an engineer and say, I'm going to teach you architecture. I'm going to hire an architect. The next thing that employers care about is, can they trust you? So, Cloud Doctor, on your next Cloud Architect interview, don't lie. Don't lie at all. So if you don't know something, simply tell them, I'm sorry, I've not had the opportunity to learn that yet, but I'm highly energetic. I'm highly enthusiastic. I love technology. I know what I know and I know what I don't know, and I can find the answers to things that I don't know very quickly. If you'd like to check my competency, let's talk about the 3 things you know best. I don't know, for me, BGP, IP multicast, and enterprise architecture. Whatever the case is, just list them. So there's that. The next thing employers care about is your energy, enthusiasm, and passion. So show it in there. They care about your willingness to go above and beyond, and they care about you being a team player. Here's what employers don't care about. Your GPA, your degrees, your certifications, that's somebody else's. So, I'm not saying that they're worthless, and they're not. I went to school too many times. I've got too many master's degrees and did too many certifications in my youth. But I'm telling you what employers care about. And when you can sell the employer that you have what they want, you're going to do great. Hope I answered your question there.
Yeah, I would say it's very important to do reconnaissance on the potential organization that you're considering, so that you can showcase that you understand it's not about you, but it's about them.
Yes.
And that would give you quite a heads up compared to the competition. And when we discuss this, we're not discussing this surface level type of knowledge that you can find, but it's going to require a little bit digging. And that's also going to show the character that you have, that you really care about what the company is about, and that you truly believe that it's a match made in heaven. And that's how you can also present it by what you know about the organization as a whole, and also about perhaps the different departments that are there. And this can apply not just when it comes to something like an architect, potential architect interview, but any person going out for a job can show that. It shows that you're different and that you care. And that's what a lot of employers want. They want to know you're invested, that you're part of the mission, you believe in it, that you believe the vision that the founder, the CEO of that company had. And that makes you more valuable to them, because you're not going to be just like a fly-by-night kind of person. There, 2 weeks later, you're gone. So it shows initiative from you and also part of your character. From Flying Kites, any suggestions on how to approach someone about being a mentor? Is this something I just ask someone about, or do I need a little finesse?
Well, you're going to have some finesse. And you're going to have a lot of finesse. And let's be reasonable why. There's not that many people that it could actually be a mentor. And what I mean by this is it's very hard to find an extremely good technology professional. Very hard. And because of that, you know, I like to say that if I interview 1,000 people, I might get one person that can do the job. And the majority of the people, I can't figure out what they've been doing for the last 10 years. It's just that hard to hire someone. And you can ask Mark, have you interviewed lots of people?
Enough, and it's a very difficult process.
How easy is it to find someone that knows anything?
Oh, it's very difficult because your wish list is always going to exceed the person's capability. I don't think I've ever met somebody, including myself, who's ever ticked all the boxes. Because again, it's a wish list. I know it sounds ridiculous, it sounds childish, but put yourself in the shoes of the person that will be hiring. It makes sense. They want the best of the best of the best. That's the same thing with us. Would you settle for a lesser mate or partner in life? No, you want the best, the thing that complements you the best. So it makes sense. But to piggyback on what you said, Mike, too, when we think about a mentor, it's a relationship.
Yes.
So you have to, again, approach it from not what you're getting, but what can you give, right? It's going to be a give and a take. In the beginning, you'll have to establish some rapport with this person. Number one, you have to figure out, is this even a person who's willing to be a mentor? Don't mistake a person posting something on social media as they're going to be acceptance to taking on people. That may not be the case. So you got to approach them slowly, start a dialogue, speak to them, and then see if that's even a possibility. Yeah. And we recommend that across the board. So view it more as a building of a relationship before you can expect anything back. Yes. And for those who have mentored, I know Mike has had mentors before, you got to understand mentors are not going to do the work for you either. So if you're in it thinking that this particular mentor is going to give you some type of tips and tricks that are going to propel you 20 years ahead, don't be fooled. That's not the case. They're there, though, to support your growth and help you. Very similar to what we're doing with the stream. We're trying to give you guys answers to your questions in hopes that perhaps you don't have to go through the same difficulties or maybe go through the same obstacles that we had to go through as we were going forward in our career. That's something a mentor can do for you. You can see us basically as mentors to a certain extent by doing these type of sessions.
And actually, that's where I was getting to. It's really hard to find someone. And if the mentor you have isn't great, they'll give you bad advice. I can't tell you how many people come to us that thought they studied cloud architecture and they learned Linux, DevOps, SysOps, and configuring. And when we try to interview them for an architecture position, they know nothing of architecture. They know hands-on engineering and systems administration. And it's the saddest thing in the world. We have to completely retrain them from scratch because the things they've been trained on, hands-on configuration, architects don't do. CloudFormation, architects don't do. Terraform, architects don't do. Python, architects don't do. SysOps, architects don't do. DevOps, architects don't do. So you're going to be there. Now, flying kites, I've had many mentors. I typically pay them about $500 an hour because that's what it takes to get a good mentor. Because the good mentor that you can pay $500 to, the reality is they could save you months worth of mistakes. And I know most people don't have that, and that's why I come here. And between Mark and I, because Mark's kind of young, Mark only has around 10 or so years of that tech experience, and I've got 25. So together, it's still 35 years, which is there. So there's that. And I would find a mentor. I would find a leader. What do I mean by a leader? Someone that's either been a principal architect or a principal engineer for engineering, principal architect for architect, someone that's a director of architecture for architects or a director of engineering for engineers, someone at the VP level. And why do I want that? Because I want you to learn from somebody that's made it. I mean, I was at a principal architect in less than 2 years because I had a mentor, but I paid for it. And other people took 15 years to get there. And most people will never make it to principal architect letters. You need the right mentor. It's like finding a martial arts coach. Some will get you to your goals and some will not. So you need that. So you need to find the mentor. You need to find common ground with the mentor. You need to be able to offer the mentor something first. What can you do for them? And then after that, you can ask about a potential mentoring relationship. Would they be willing? How often would they be willing to meet? What can they do? And a lot of times it's similar. I've mentored a lot of, either kids that were kids. I've taken on a lot of kids that struggled, and I did it as a volunteer because I grew up in a challenging environment. I saw kids that had a challenging environment that were struggling, that were 16 years old. And it was like, let me help you live a life that nobody else could do. And they got big jobs, and I was thrilled about it. And they had power in life, and they loved it. But maybe you've got something in common with one of the mentors out there if you don't have the budget to pay for a good mentor. But you need a good mentor, a good mentor, a good mentor, a good mentor. And doing so, you'll be there. But you're going to need a lot of finesse because you're asking for a lot. Let's actually get to Bertrand Atem next, and then we'll go through this. I just saw this question come in out of order, and honestly, I get this question every day, and it typically saddens me.
All right,
So
let me read it for the stream so that we have it, and then we'll tackle that one. So for Bertrand, what advice can you give to someone who just finished the AWS Cloud Architecture 6 months online course to find a job? I'm assuming it says, is it advisable to apply to a consulting company or a tech company?
So Bertrand Atem, I'm going to ask you these questions. Please answer them in the chat box. Have you given presentations? Have you responded in your architecture training? Have you responded to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs? Have you learned architecture frameworks like TOGAF, which talked about everything from the business vision? What amount of business training? Do you know how to do ROI models? Do you know how to build the business case? Do you know how to justify $1 billion expenditure, for example? Do you know how to build an architecture team? Lead that architecture team. Were you trained in creating thought leadership documents, create like white papers, etc.? Because these are the things we do every day. I'm assuming they trained you in how to facilitate meetings because you need to know that. So let's assume you learned some of these skills. I would ask you, do you know how to design a demilitarized zone, for example, for remote access versus security? Do you know how to design a global enterprise routing environment to generate 5 nines availability? Given that 98% of organizations are multi-cloud, do you know how to make multi-cloud work? Do you know which types of AWS services to avoid? Things like DynamoDB or ECS or Amazon Aurora. If the answer is no, and what you've been learning is how to configure, maybe the management console, maybe CloudFormation, maybe Linux, maybe DevOps, you've been actually trained in systems administration, not cloud architecture. So I'd like you to do the following. Answer my question, ideally, and then I can tell you what your next step should be. But I'd also like to invite you tomorrow to the How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar, because we get people every day that have multiple AWS certifications, that have done a lot of hands-on architecture training that has only what's called cloud administration versus architecture. The webinar is free, and if you want, I can interview you and I can see if you're ready. And if you're ready, I'll tell you who you can even talk to, because I'd be honored to do so, and I want to help you get there. But I want to make sure that you actually have architecture knowledge, because what happens if you go on these interviews without architecture knowledge, they'll just say, do not hire. And then you'll do 10 of them and you'll get not hired on all 10, which will kill you emotionally, which I don't want. And then when you're ready on a good job, you're not going to feel good and you're not going to feel ready. But we can easily get you hired. So I'm not sure, have you done any of those things that I asked you? Let me know in the chat box. And if not, download the completely free guide in the description on what is an architect and how do we do and the skills you need, because I listed 100% of them. And if you have all those skills, you're going to do great. You'll do wonderfully. And if you don't, now you know what to learn between what you've done and what you need to get there, and then you can get any job you want. It's like when I started my tech career. Somebody told me that I needed to get certified to get a network engineering job. And I got a Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer, a Microsoft Certified Professional, a CCNA, a CCDA, a CCNP, and a CCDP. And I sent out resumes, and everybody was like, well, you don't know the job. And then I learned the job after the certifications, and a couple months later, I had an incredible job. 6 months later, I was a lead architect, and within 2 years, I was a principal architect. And Bertrand Atem, I want that same success for you. So please download the free guide. Please come tomorrow, and I can interview if you want, and I can tell you where to go based upon your skill.
Yeah, it's a little tough without knowing the details of this particular course that you took. If we were to make, and I don't like to do this, but in this case, I'll do it, make an assumption that it's like most courses, it's going to be heavily focused on learning the technology. And the reality is, and we discussed this plenty of times, so we'll emphasize this again, is working at an organization, irregardless of scale, is always multifaceted. So technology is just a facet of that. So there's going to be, like Mike mentioned, a lot of these what we consider soft skills that are going to be required just to be a productive member of that team. And if you want to excel at the job, that's not where the other 10, 20% come in that are going to set you apart and put you into positions where perhaps you can start off as a team lead. From a team lead, you progress towards more of a senior role as well. It could be architecture role, it could be engineering role. In this case, again, as we said, if it's more heavily based on technology, it's probably going to be more of an engineering or an administration role. So just keep that in mind. And something that I wish I would have known when I started my career is do a dual approach, meaning while you're still looking for potential candidates that you find great, that you say, you know what, I can envision myself working there, and I believe that with the skills I have, I can bring value, and that's the important word, value, to this organization. Do that approach, and at the same time, let them find you, meaning make yourself visible, as Mike said. You're going to write some articles showcasing that you understand the technology and that you understand what its use case, its application. And that shows that you're not just a techie, but that you can be a productive member of that particular team or organization. From Kojo, for how long are we going to have access to the course content after signing up?
Kojo, you will always have the course content. We don't take people's course content away. You know, I've got people that graduated, and by graduated, I mean got hired, because we're not like a boot camp where we just kick people out after 16 weeks. The people stay on our programs until they're hired. And I've got people that, you know, come back 6 months later because they want to attend a class. There's someone who works at AWS who we trained before he got his job at AWS that comes to our classes because he likes to hear how we still present things, even though he works at AWS. And that's fine. We've got lots of people that are working as architects after we've trained that still participate in our program. So you have a year in the live classes. You have unlimited in the Slack community and unlimited for the course content. It's yours. You bought it. As long as you use it within, you know, the terms and conditions of the course, it's yours. And we want you to go back to it 1 year from now, 5 years from now. And of course, we always constantly update our content anyway. So that way, if you have to go back and look at something, you'll hear. And you'll hear from our expert architects that have decades of years of experience, that have all made it to the top, because we want our students to have the best lives possible. Nothing about us would ever do anything where you just buy it and it's like, you're gone. It's been a month. No, we don't do that. It's yours to access for as long as, you know, as long as we exist as a company.
Yeah. And we try to be fair, right? So if you pay the full purchase price, or if you get it on a discount, but you purchase it outright, it is yours. We don't take it away, like Mike said. And on the other side, it's fair if you sign up for a specific amount of time, say 3 months or so forth, then you have access for that amount of time to the course. So that benefits you as well, benefits us as well. But we always tell people, if you want to get the most up-to-date content as it updates with the live classes or the recordings, let's say you don't want to do live classes, at least you get the recording of the live classes, purchase it outright. It's always going to be a better value anyway. I do that too with different things. If I feel like it's going to benefit me more, why this whole rent-to-own type of nonsense? I personally don't believe it. If I can get it outright, I don't have to worry about it. It is mine. As long as I got a post internet. If my internet goes out, I can access it. But we'll blame that on AT&T or somebody else.
Yeah, and we don't really do the rental subscription model thing around here. Where I come from, you buy it. In a perfect world, you pay cash for it, and then it's yours.
Yeah.
Great question.
Great question. Question from Traveling East. What do you think about the RHCSA? Is it really necessary? My career path, the way it was told to me, is to pick a domain, specialize in an OS, or become an engineer in it, in the RHCE, and then become an architect. So we got Red Hat.
Okay, so Traveling East, and I love Red Hat, but let's put it this way. The reason I asked you what your goal was, and you said sysadmin or DevOps, was because of this. There's no reason to become an engineer before you can become an architect. That's really like saying is, in order to become an airplane pilot and fly the plane, I actually need to become an airplane mechanic first. And the answer to that is no. And Traveling East, I have most of my people, I'd say 50% of them have never worked in tech. And I'd say the other 50% of the people that I get trained and get hired as architects have been engineers for a while. I'm going to tell you that it's just as hard to take an engineering mindset unlearn engineering and learn architecture as it is for me to train a sales rep, a nurse, a pharmacist, or a teacher. And I think of Nicole Chow, who got our architect job. I think of Eladi, who's a pharmacist I'm working with right now, who's so close to being ready to interview. I'm thinking about Pierre Dassault, who worked on sailboats, who got hired at Lease Web, or Ivan Tamba, who was selling shoes. I'm sorry, no, he was working as a waiter before we got him hired. Takes me about the same amount of time. I had to work with a gentleman named Harsha for about a year to get him hired. And I think Ivan Tamba took 6 months to get hired by AWS as a solution architect, and he was selling shoes. I will tell you, Daniel Bose took me about 6 months to get hired at JP Morgan Chase, and he was selling shoes. Ivan Tamba was a waiter. I will tell you that Jordan Kitiko took about 6 months to get hired at AWS, and it was his first tech job ever. Balwinder Kerr was a stay-at-home mom. It took her about a year to get hired over at Microsoft. So, you know, the key is the career that you train for is there. Now, if your goal is to maintain in SysOps or DevOps, honestly, if you're already working in it, you don't need it. So here's where certifications help you, and I still think you should get some. In the beginning, they help you get an interview, but no manager will ever hire you on it. They ultimately care about your skills. So if you're going to be a sysadmin, it's all about understanding how to manipulate that operating system. And it's not just the commands, because you can look up the commands. But if you're a sysadmin, at some point you want to get into the bigger work, which is much more engineering related. And you need to start thinking, not how do I patch a kernel, but what does that operating system kernel do? How does it manage memory? How do those device drivers sit in that kernel? Can we use that how does it work with scheduling processes or hyper-threading out the kernel? Or how does that kernel interact with, say, a hypervisor? And it's putting you more in the noodle work or the brain work or the planning work, because that's going to pay double what you're going to get in the certifications. Now, I do like a few certifications, but let's actually analyze the ultimate goal. You know, you could go to salary.com and go Google, go to salary.com and look up the average salary of someone with business acumen. And you're going to see it's over $550,000 a year. And then you're going to look at these certifications and you're going to notice that they peak. So, you know, a Red Hat certified engineer, if you want to be a Red Hat engineer, is great. But honestly, I caution you to focus too much on a single OS. The same way I would caution someone to focus on a single cloud. The reason I don't just train AWS with my architects in our program is if they did, they couldn't work anywhere, because there's no place or almost no place that just uses AWS. There's never going to be an environment where, for the most part, where it's all going to be Red Hat. There's going to be some Red Hat. There's going to be some Ubuntu that's floating out there. There's going to be Red Hat flavors like Oracle Linux, which isn't Red Hat, but it's based on Red Hat, Amazon Linux, etc. And if I'm going to hire a sysadmin, I need them to understand Linux. I need them to understand Linux hypervisor truly. And I'm necessarily looking for their ability to automate things with, say, Bash shell scripting, with some Python scripting. I'm looking for them to pre-schedule stuff with cron and get it to run. I'm looking for them to set up a high-performance computing platform. I'm looking for them to optimize the storage, not the hands-on stuff that's taught in the certification. So you can look at your certification as your intro-level training. Even the hardest certification in the world, which is the Cisco Certified Internet Expert, is still intro level. And yes, it costs about $20,000 to prepare for the CCI exam. Yes, it's at least 1,000 hours of preparation. Yes, it's at least 50,000 pages of reading to get there. But at the end of the day, it's just Cisco stuff. And then we go out there and we work as network engineers or network architects, different job completely. And when we're training, and all of a sudden, now we've got to deal with things that were never covered in our certifications. We're dealing with different applications. We're dealing with different technologies, and we have to adapt those things for business use cases. So what I would say is get enough certifications to do your job. And that's why we need to figure it out. If it was DevOps, I'd probably get one of those, like an AWS DevOps Pro and a Red Hat certified engineer. I stopped doing any more certifications after that, and maybe I'd get an MBA. Or I would take some presentation skills, some sales skills class, some executive classes, because that kind of stuff can add $100,000 or $200,000 to your salary, and nobody really cares about your certifications, except for the people selling you certifications. Yes, I train my people in certifications, but honestly, I don't care if they have a certification or not. Certification never comes into question whether I'm going to hire someone unless it's the CCIE. And I'll tell you why it's the CCIE. Because they started doing the CCIE around 1995, and they started counting at 1,028 because they were geeky and they thought it was 2 to the 10th power would be a good place to start. And we've got about 65,000, which means it took 30 years to train 65,000 CCIEs and get them passed. Because most people go, 90% just fail. They fail 2, 3, 4 times because it's hard. And what is it about the CCIE that's good? Well, it teaches us something. It teaches the person won't quit. And honestly, it's hard to find people that have the mental fortitude not to quit when things get tough. It also teaches us that they can get a job done, that they won't give up, that they'll do a lot of work. It also shows us that they're willing to go above and beyond. And it's pretty hard to pass a CCIE if you don't know something. Look, you can pass a Red Hat exam and know nothing. You can pass an AWS exam and know nothing by buying a practice test, but there's no way anybody's going to get through. So yes, you could do those certifications. There's nothing wrong with them. But I'd caution you to get 2 or 3 really good certifications, the hard ones. And then after that, I'd recommend you focus on bettering your skills, becoming the best you can be, making sure you have something to offer your client, your customer, whoever hires you, or whoever you freelance to, and then focus on the big, high-powered skills, sales skills, business skills, leadership skills, executive presence, etc., etc. Hope that answers your question.
Now, I'm not 100% sure if this is going to be the case, but you mentioned you worked in the government sector. Sometimes what I've seen come across is that to stay in a specific position or job when it comes to the government, a certain certification is a requirement. So they may not give you a choice not to get it. Now, if that's the case, don't let what we said dissuade you. If it's a requirement and you're going to stay in that field for that position, go ahead and get that. But for example, at least what I know about this particular certification, it's very sysadmin heavy. So I can't, with a good conscience, tell you that it would be great as you go towards being an architect. That's the only thing where I'm a little split on it. I don't know how you feel about that, Mike. I probably would rather say if you know nothing, let's say about Linux, and you wanted to get up your competency in it, because you want to be a DevOps, let's say, architect, and you want to be able to communicate with the engineers, perhaps it might be useful to kind of go through the material, but not sit for the actual exam. You might save yourself a couple $100. Aside from that, again, what do you believe it's going to accomplish for you? Is it really going to have value? That's how I look at it. And I think Mike, you've come across that too, right? Where there's sometimes some requirements within a certain position, like a government position, that they have to have a certain certification.
Yeah, the government has different certifications than others. For example, the Security Plus is a CompTIA certification that I would never recommend. Now, it's not that it's a bad certification. It's not that the content isn't good. On the commercial market, it's just not worth anything. Where the CISSP is worth something. Boy, these Apple AI things are a little goofy behind me. You can't shut them off, at least on our streaming platform. Now, but they demand CompTIA Security Plus on anybody the government hires in cybersecurity. So somebody wants to work for the government, find out what they are.
Yeah.
So, but there's that. But, you know, outside of the U.S. government, employers care about what you can do for them. Your competency, your energy, your enthusiasm, your passion, your emotional intelligence, your leadership skills, and whether you're willing to go above and beyond and how great of a team player you are. So I focus more on that.
Yep. Wonderful. Thank you, Travelings, for the question. Don't be shy. Be sure to ask your questions. That's what we're here for.
So the next question is coming from Vinay. And it says, hello, thanks for reading my question. Do I need to know coding for the Generative AI Architect course and jobs? So, Vinay, let's answer here. Architects don't touch the technology. The reason so many architects have a major challenge getting hired is they train for engineering. Here's what the architect does, and I'll make it very clear. We start by asking the clients about their vision for the business. By the client, I typically mean the C-suite, because the CEO has the strategy for that business. The chief operating officer knows how that business operates and its pain points and its challenges. The chief financial officer we have to talk to somewhere along the line because we've got to get their financial resources for them to buy the architecture. So there's that. The next thing we need to understand is how the business process occurs. Now, 70% of technology projects are complete disasters, meaning they cost the company money and do nothing for them. So that's like just dumping money out there. And I promise you, nobody wants to waste billions of dollars, and a lot of companies do on tech. So we have to understand the business process. How is a product made? How does sales occur? How does the supply chain operate? What is the process to produce this? What is the process to service this? What is the process to support this? What is the process to everything? And we need to analyze those processes with the client and then help the client figure out new processes based upon their future vision. That's architecture. Now, from there, we ultimately need to evaluate what their current technology is, and that means often bringing in a bunch of engineers to baseline their systems. And then we need to build an architecture team of engineers and architects. Why? Because the engineers are super techie, and we architects are focused on the business while the engineers are focused on the tech. So that means in an AI architecture, I'm going to bring a network architect in, a security architect in, a cloud architect in, a DevOps engineer, a data scientist, a big data professional, an IAM architect, which is different than a security architect, and a whole host of other people to work together to design the system. Then, Vinay, I'm going to document the architecture. I'm going to create some beautiful diagrams. I'm going to create a document. I'm going to give some presentations. I'm going to present that architecture to the client. I'm going to help sell the architecture to the client. I'm going to negotiate the architecture to the client. I'm probably going to have to manage some stakeholders and manage a multi-vendor environment along the way. I'm going to help that client set up a governance structure for the people. I'm probably going to write a statement of work. I'm going to respond to an RFI, RFP, RFQ. And then as soon as that client says, yes, I want it, Mike, we go off to a new client and design a new architecture, and the engineers build it. So, Vinay, architects don't code, architects don't configure, architects don't implement, architects don't build. And Vinay, that's why when I have people that have been engineering and coding for decades, I have to completely retrain them into the architect world, because it's a completely different career. It's a planning career. Engineering is a building career. There's no coding. You will learn how to design an architecture at our program, and you're going to be real good at it. And there are deep technical skills that you need to understand. Deep technical skills. But the difference is they're technical skills on how to design the skills versus how to build them. So let's talk a little bit about what those skills are real quick from a technical perspective. It's knowledge of databases and training data. It's really about inference engines. It's thinking about how you're going to build your models. It's thinking about how you're going to train your AI models. It's thinking about how your models are going to be tested and how the AI is going to actually be operated, all while doing this in a manner to determine how you're going to optimize your client's business performance with AI. So that's what we do as architects. We just launched our new AI architect program. It is awesome. The feedback I got has been extremely great. And I extended the 50% off sale along with Chris and Alonzo and Mark. We decided to do it this morning because we had so many requests. So take advantage of it. Okay. While we're at it, before we get to the next question, we've got a free AWS Advanced Networking Bootcamp at the end of this month. Sign up in the chat box. It's completely free. And we've got a How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar tomorrow. Join us for that too. It's free. It's on Zoom. We'll talk.
Yeah. And just one thing before the next question. I don't want anyone to get dismayed or frustrated or discouraged when they look at these various jobs. Many times these job postings are written by people that have no understanding of what the job entails. So we see that a lot with architect jobs. We see this you can see this even in engineering jobs. They're mainly written as a wish list by people that have no idea what they're writing. So when you see architect jobs and they're asking you to do the things that an engineer would do, you really have to go to them and find out why that is. It could be that perhaps they're a smaller company and you may have to wear more hats. But then the question is going to be, is that something you truly want to be doing? Because that's not the actual thing that an architect would do, as Mike explained.
No.
If you go back though and you find out it's a pretty decent sized company, they do have the budget for an actual architect, then the question is, and again, this is where you do some reconnaissance, to find out is that where they misinformed, where they given bad advice on actually how to structure the job posting to be able to attract people. Because I've seen plenty of times where they'll try to add so much of a responsibility into their job posting, not necessarily because they were ill-advised, but because they were trying to draw in the most amount of candidates, and then they can weed through them. So it's going to take a little bit digging, at least from that type of perspective, to find out what is really going on. But you need to keep in mind, architects, you focus business, very little hands-on. And if you get to a job that has hands-on, because they're small, you will need to make the decision if that's something you want to pursue or not. Just a heads up.
And once you go hands-on, you're not doing anything related to architecture. 100% of it becomes engineering, because you can no longer focus on the business. You can't re-architect business processes. You can't be with the C-suite all day. You can't be doing the planning and the governance and the stakeholder management. You're either an engineer, and that's great if you want to be an engineer, or you're an architect. But where people get in trouble is they think their experience in engineering is going to teach them something about architecture, and it just never does. It's a completely different career.
Yeah, they won't make you proficient at the tech, but that's about it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how many years someone's a flight attendant. No one's going to give them a job as a pilot. It's just a different job. It's a completely different set of skills. But the good news is any of us can become anything. I've got plenty of cloud engineers. It takes me a year to train them, and they get hired as a cloud architect. I've got plenty of people that have never worked in any tech job, and their first job as an architect takes about the same amount of time. All that matters is having the right skills. Not skills, but the right skills.
Right. From Ebuka, I got into cloud in 2024 and I have an MBA, a business analytics certification, experience in AWS and Azure, but still trying to break in as a solution architect. I see it as a long journey towards success.
Ebuka?
Follow-up?
Okay.
Tyrone, is there a follow-up to that? Or? Okay, and that says, I'm not able to get as much interviews for the SA role. It's either there are too many people searching for similar roles, or my resume isn't tailored enough. I'm still happy to learn from the great minds. So
a couple of things. One is join us tomorrow on the How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. It's nothing for us to teach you what you need to do to get hired, and we can help you. I also have a free document in the description of this video. Now let's talk about what you said. You have said you have experience on AWS and Azure. Are you have hands-on engineering experience? Because it has nothing to do with architecture. So here's architecture. How would you design your demilitarized zone for your mission-critical web app? That's architecture. Here's architecture. How would you design for a secure remote access for an organization with 100,000 employees? How would you deal with an organization's 5,000 remote locations that need to share information across 3 clouds? This is architecture. Architecture is, why shouldn't I use the cloud native security tools? What is it I can do with the public tools that are out there that are going to create a better, more strong environment? Architecture is why I can't use zero trust or defense in depth. I need to use the combination based on it. Architecture is redesigning an organization's business processes, because if you don't redesign the organization's business processes, the technology that you want to implement will not make the net impacted result. So you need to be there. Architecture is dealing with the stakeholders across the entire organization to get their buy-in. So join us on the thing tomorrow. If your resume looks like an engineer, meaning you're talking about setting up S3 buckets, and you're talking about EC2 instances and Azure Blob, you're showing the world that you are not an architect. You're showing them that you're an engineer. And a lot of times we see these things. We see people that are going there and they're doing everything from somebody else's job. And the thing is, I remember many years ago, my wife said, dear, I'd really love a cat. And I love dogs. Apparently I love cats after I've had a cat, but I was always a dog person. And when I went to the cat rescue, there was this golden retriever that came over to me. And it had the most beautiful fur. It put its head on my lap. It looked at me. It was the most beautiful dog I've ever seen. And I hugged that dog, and I so wanted to take that dog home. But at the end of the day, I remembered that my wife sent me to get a cat. And I couldn't bring home a dog because my wife didn't want a dog. She wanted a cat. So I brought a cat named Cindy, who's the second love of my life. She sleeps with me every night. She follows me from room to room. She's a great cat. But the key is, when you're looking for a cat, you don't get a dog. When you're looking for an engineer, it's not about your hands-on experience. The good news is because you probably have a good amount of business acumen from your MBA, which is probably half of what you need. So most likely, you need to be taught system design. And when you have the system design, not system building, system design versus system building, you will have more opportunities. But it's not a long road. I'll give you some examples. Ivan Tamba, great guy from Cameroon, 6 months from the time we met him to the time we got him trained as his first architect. Richard Afukar was hired by AWS within months of being in our program. Delroy Batt took about 5 months. His last job was on, on ambulances, and he got hired by CDW as a solution architect as his first job. Richard Ferrari was working at a bank in a non-technical role, 9 months with us, and he got his first solutions architect job, like it was nothing. Lenny Burnett was a video editor, great video editor, trained with us for 6 months, got hired by our electronics part of Citrix in about 6 months. Daniel Bosu was a high school dropout, hired by JP Morgan Chase with no background. While we're at JP Morgan Chase, Jennifer Ema, who we trained. She was a mental health tech, never worked in tech. 6 months later, she was hired by JP Morgan Chase as an architect. Wallace Sagana was a sales rep, hired by JP Morgan Chase as an enterprise architect as his first job. After we trained him, he learned architecture. And that's the key, is you've got to learn architecture versus engineering. So come to our free webinar. We'll talk to you. And if you want, I'll even look at your LinkedIn profile. And if you want to give me a quick look, pop it in the chat box. I'll even look at it, because your LinkedIn is your resume. And I bet you your resume says engineering, 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 and you want to apply to be a solution architect, and you're basically showing them you're prepared for the wrong job, because I see it every single day. And if you have cloud architect / cloud engineer in your resume, that is a dead giveaway. And if you have things in your resume that aren't right, it is also a dead giveaway, because I see a lot of architecture resumes that don't have any architecture on them. So, but if I see cloud architect, pipe, cloud engineer, and I know that an architect designs, presents, and sells to improve business performance, and I know an engineer builds and builds, but if the person has both on their resume, they don't know who they are. And if they don't know who they are and they're confused about what an architect or an engineer is, chances are they don't know either role, and I can't hire them either. So lots of branding. We do lots of free brand things on that. We've got some videos that are out there. Come join us on the How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job guide. Come download the completely free Get Your First Architect Job ebook, the description of this video, and then I think you're going to do great.
I hope you can join us tomorrow, Ebuka. It'd be great to talk to you and see how else we can help you via the Zoom call. From Cloud Doctor, is specializing in a specific area like security architect, data architect, AI architect, etc., more beneficial than becoming a cloud architect?
Cloud Doctor, first we have to focus on what our goals are, because we've got to pick the one that makes us happy. Now we have to look at what is beneficial, and we have to look at what our goals are. If our goals are salary, like how to earn the most, it's really about your business acumen as opposed to your specialty, with the exception of the AI architect. And I'll tell you why that is for right now. But generally speaking, the closer you are to the tech, the more tech specialized you are, the less you'll earn. The more business specialized you are, the more you'll earn. So if I've got two architects, I've got a generic architect that's not great at business, and then I've got a security architect that's a cloud security architect. That security architect, the cloud security architect, will earn more than the traditional architect because it's a specialty, which is why an orthopedic surgeon typically earns more than a family physician or an internal medicine doctor. But at the end of the day, Cloud Doctor, the closer we get to the business, the more of a business executive we are, the more we earn. So what do we mean by that? What I mean by that is, if I've got an architect and they've got an MBA and they've got executive presence and good leadership skills and good sales skills and good emotional intelligence, now we're looking at that $500,000 to $1 million chief architect role and principal architect roles versus the traditional one. So all in all, the better the business you are as an architect, a generic architect like a cloud architect or enterprise architect, the more you'll learn, except the AI architect. Now, why is right now the AI architect such a good job? Well, I'll show you why. So Tyrone, I'm going to share something. I'm going to need your help. And let me go share this, and then Tyrone, I'll let you have me share this real quick. So here's the difference in the AI Architect program, and I'll show you as soon as Tyrone. So here we've got a traditional supply and demand curve from macroeconomics. And basically what we're saying is for a given demand, the greater the demand at a given supply, the higher the price. Now, if you're trying to buy gold or diamonds or Bitcoin or even GPUs when they exist, you know, that's kind of where we're dealing with. The less of a supply, the higher the price, the greater the demand, the higher the price. So here's where it gets interesting. There's a whole lot of people that can do engineering, so we're not going to worry about that. But the supply of someone that actually understands the AI technology, the model building, the data hygiene, the compute, the storage, and everything else is so small. So as we raise this line, we start getting into an environment, because we don't just need the technology. We need the communication skills, executive presence, emotional intelligence, business acumen, CXO relevancy. So now we're in a part of the world where you can see this new supply and demand curve, the price went up. So when you're dealing with these rare architecture worlds, and for the next 3 to 5 years, AI architecture is going to be extremely rare. You know, there's plenty of $500,000 to $1 million AI architect roles that are out there, plenty of them. And they're not that hard to get if you've got some good knowledge in business acumen and AI architecture. So typically speaking, the closer you are to the business, but right now and for the next several years, there is a demand for AI architects like greater than anything you've ever seen. And why is that? AI is the most disruptive technology since the internet, and it can enable organizations to do more with less people. And it can supercharge their productivity and their efficiency and help with so many things. So organizations are investing so much money in AI architecture. And they can either invest it correctly because they've got a great AI architect that can help them make the best investments to maximize their business performance, or they're going to deal with the techies that are going to say, oh, we need this tech. It's cool. It's cool. It's cool. We got to try this. We got to try this. And we'll figure it out. And that's part of the 70% of all technology projects that are complete total disasters. The dog wags the tail. The tail doesn't move the dog around. And that architect right now is the absolute most strategic person in the AI space. So cloud architect, great. Cloud architect with good business acumen skills, the sky's the limit. AI architect with good business skills, the sky's the limit. Security architect, great opportunity, it really is. But it's going to give you less potential top-end salary than, as a rule, than the AI would right now or the extreme elite business side would. But guess what? If you love security, and I'm a security person, I love security, it might be worth it to take a $300,000 high-end security architect job and do what I love. Because if you're happy, who cares at the end of the day? You know, it's any of these architect jobs will pay you more than you'd ever want. So although I don't typically recommend the data architect job, I typically see that as kind of like the, what do they call it? The redheaded ugly stepchild of the family. Because, you know, you've got the data scientists that are doing some of that stuff, and you've got the generative AI architects, and the AI architects, they're going to do something with the data to make it work. And there's a little bit of overlapping in that skill set. So I'd probably avoid the data architect role. I like the network architect role. I love the security architect role. I love the traditional role with lots of business acumen. I'm totally in love with the enterprise architect role because it's the business transformation role, and the AI architect. To me, they're the best jobs out there for the next decade and more.
It always behooves me certain questions like that, and I don't mean to disparage what you just said there, Cloud Doctor, but all of these type of careers, they take a lot of time investment and resource investment. We're being sold out there that this is a overnight success. You get started, you can read the book, and you're good to go, or something like that. So, like Mike mentioned, the first thing I would probably say, what is it that you like? Right? Nothing else really matters. You're going to spend so much time doing these particular tasks, maybe in the security field, the data field, AI, that you really have to figure out, is this something that you can stomach continually doing over and over and over again for days on end, for months on end, for years on end? So while money is important, I would definitely say first figure out if you're going to be doing this. It's quite a time investment. Me and Mike, we always mention the CCIE and how long it took. There is a reason why only so many people do it. Aside money aside, there's really the reason for it. You're going to want to have to do it. There's not a lot of people that are willing to do what you just mentioned, to go that extra mile, to be proficient, competent in these type of endeavors, such as any type of architectures, but especially if you think about security. Wow, I mean, security is ever-evolving field. I don't think learning ever stops in that. I think that's a 24/7 endeavor, just to be able to learn in security. And then AI, man, we're just at the cusp of AI. I mean, this thing, that train has not even gotten started yet. I would put it that way. People are still finding out. Wait a second, I have ChatGPT, a search engine on steroids. They don't even comprehend yet exactly what it is. So that is something. I mean, it's going to be pervasive in all our endeavors of life. So which is more beneficial? Whichever you love.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong. The money will come as long as you're great at it.
That's the key. And you can earn at anything as long as you're great at it. And you have to love it, because if you don't love it, you won't be passionate enough to be great at it. And at the end of the day, it's all about being great.
Yeah.
And also, we only live once. You know, Cloud Doctor, I used to practice medicine in my youth before I moved over to tech. And I've seen how it ends. And at the end of the day, I've seen a lot of people say, Mike, I wish I could save lives like you did back when I used to be in healthcare. Or I've seen a lot of people say, you know, Mike, I wish I had more time with my family. Or I wish I did this. But, you know, they're not going to say, you know, I only got paid $300,000 in this architect job, and another one was going to pay me $400,000. Did I live a bad life? If you're happy, it's a good life.
Yeah. Yeah, and we had the LinkedIn post go out today in regards to time management. How do we use our time wisely, since it's a finite resource? And across the board, if you read the response that we received, and of course we gave our perspective of it too, because we've been in this quite a while, it always comes down to a balance. Now, we're not saying that balance is something that you can always achieve. I don't think that's realistic. Mike can attest for that when he studied for his CCIE, his CISSP. There is no balance when you're trying to tackle something like that. But overall in your life, try to find balance. I think that will serve you well. It will keep you sane. And more importantly, you have people that care for you and you care for them. And that's the most important thing in life, believe it or not. But
Absolutely.
Wonderful question, Doctor. Love it.
Bring in the next question.
So from Ella, this is going to be a multi-part, Mike, okay? So we're going to start off with, am I wasting my time with a program that I'm currently enrolled in that is helping me earn my ITF Plus, Google IT Support Certification, and A+? Should I skip this program and take a different route? They have a cloud computing program that I would need to apply for, but only after I complete the first program. So, and I believe there's one more part from Ella. She's looking to be a cloud solutions architect. So what's your thought on that?
So Ella, my recommendation is that you take a cloud architecture program like the kind we take. So let's go back to the first thing so I can remember the certifications. And I'm going to tell you what these are. So if you had these certifications, Ella, and you wanted to apply for a cloud architect job, I would tell you to remove them from your resume. The A+ is a certification typically that people get if they want to work at the Best Buy Geek Squad and do PC repair. The IT support certification is how do you support stuff, you know, calling help desk. And those don't belong on an architect's resume. And here's the reason they don't belong. The one is a hands-on techie like a technician, and an architect is an executive. I also want to tell you, if you take a cloud computing program, it still won't make you a cloud architect. And here's why there is no such thing as a cloud computing program, even though I've seen them, and it's the reason why we have to retrain people from every single cloud program, cloud master program, cloud this program. Cloud computing is comprised of 500 different people's jobs. All cloud computing is renting space in someone else's network in a data center. So what do I mean by that? You know, you could buy a house, which you own, which is your data center, or you could rent a room in a hotel. That's what cloud computing is. So what goes into cloud computing? We need networking people, and that is a specialty in and of itself. You could spend 25 years of your life just learning one-sided networking. What do I mean by that? My expertise is on routing and switching. There's other people in networking that can spend 25 years learning just wireless networks. And I mean like Wi-Fi networks. And people will spend another 25 years learning 5G and 6G networks, which is a different kind of network. Then we'll have our unified communications, voice and video. People will spend 25 years on that. And that's just networking. Now, Ella, when it comes to security, we have security architects like me that design the systems. We've got security engineers that build the systems. And we've got penetration testers, which are paid to break into the systems. Now we get into the data side, right? We have data scientists that do their thing and analyze data, etc. We've got machine learning and artificial intelligence people on the cloud that design artificial intelligence programs. And then after that, we've got some big data architects that architect data and data pipelines. Now, we also have identity and access management architects that do unified communications. Now we're going to have architects that focus on load balancers and reverse proxies, believe it or not, because that's in the performance optimization. Now we've got other architects that focus nothing on databases. And of course, in the cloud, we'll have the cloud engineers that build it. We'll have DevOps engineers that automate it. So all this stuff all falls under cloud computing. And unless the cloud computing program is 15 years long, they can't teach you cloud computing. So what do they ultimately teach in this cloud computing? They teach the name of a certification of a service and a certification on how to configure that, which again has absolutely nothing what we do. So if you want to become a cloud architect, I'd like you to download the completely free guide on what we do. I'd also like you to take our completely free webinar tomorrow. We'll go over the role, because I just want you to get to your goal. And maybe your goal is not to be an architect, it's to do something else, and you've got an option for free training to do something else. That is fine. And you could do that something else, and then you could buy architecture training later when you're ready for it. But what I don't want you to do is do what I did. Ella, I spent 7 years in school. I have a $100,000 education to learn internal medicine. 7 years. And you know what I did in the end? Something completely different. I actually went into tech. So you pop something in the chat box that you come from marketing. Good. Marketing has more in common and related to what you would be doing as an architect than any of this A+, Google Security Plus, or even the cloud computing stuff, because marketing at least involves in obtaining customer requirements, meaning finding what the market wants. Now, the architect does that. That's no different than asking the executive team of an organization, what is the future vision for your business? Now, what's part of marketing? After you understand your customer, it's what do we produce, right? What's the product going to look like based upon the customer demands? Well, now we're an architect. What's our solution going to look like based upon the customer goals? See, that part's still the same, and you're getting there. Now, in a marketing, you're going to think about how do I promote this solution, right? Or this product out in the market. Now, as an architect, we've created an architecture, and now we've got to go deal with every department head in an organization. We've got to convince the CFO that the business case is worth paying for it, like you would have to do in marketing anyway. We've got to now convince the key stakeholders. This new architecture is going to get in the way of your business, but we need this one because it's going to support the best of the company. So there's so much stakeholder management. There's so much promotion. There's so many presentations. There's so many calls, which is a lot more like marketing. So you have much more in common in marketing than you actually with architecture. But no, what you're doing now has honestly nothing to do with architecture. You could take both of these classes and you're still going to have to learn architecture if you want to be an architect. Because marketing and sales are two different things. Those marketing people don't do direct sales. Most salespeople don't know how to do marketing, even though they're kind of still somewhat related to revenue. And it's going to be the same thing here. So join our webinar. Please ask more questions. I promise you the architect role is the greatest role in the world. And I've got someone that we trained, Alonzo, on our team. We trained him, got him as a job as an architect. And Alonzo and I, we honestly could be brothers. So I begged him to come back and work for us, plucked him from his cloud role that we trained him for. And it's a great place to be. Please ask more questions. I'd love to help.
And Ella, this is I hope you would do me this favor. There's a couple of things I want you to do. Just as Mike mentioned, download the free guide so that you have it as a reference on what it means to be able to get your first cloud architect job. Then what I would like for you to do is find positions or companies that are hiring for actual cloud architects or architects in general. Look at them a little bit. Start writing down the common threads that you see from that. So this is the reverse engineering process that I want you to do. Compare what you find on those job postings to the free guide with the particular courses that somebody suggested to you to go through. And then tomorrow, if you're able to join us, let me know if you believe in your heart that these particular technician jobs or technician certifications that you've listed, including this cloud computing course, would get you closer to your goal of becoming a cloud architect. That's a little favor I'm asking for you, because I'm curious to hear from you as you do the research, and it wouldn't take you too long to do it, if that's still the belief, and if you believe that it was great advice that you received prior. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you can join us and let me know what you found out.
That's a great name. Where I come from, Ella means I'm going to like, so if Mark were to call me on the phone, I'd say Ella, which means come or come forward and come forward. So like Ella though means entry, whereas Exodos means exit. Out of curiosity, if you're from Greece. So Tyrone, who's next?
Perfect. So from Cloud Doctor, it says, I absolutely love networking, and so do we. Approve of the CCIE. Would becoming a cloud architect be the first step?
So Cloud Doctor, we're going to get to that in a second. If you have any questions, please bring them forward. Mark and I want to help you. Hello, you're from Lebanon. Your father's Lebanese. I haven't been to Lebanon in a little while, but the last time I went there, it was great, and great olive oil too, but that's neither here nor there. So Cloud Doctor, you love networking. I love networking too. So I would say a lot of the networking people like me ultimately went to the cloud because we saw that the networks themselves were going to be virtualized. We knew the data centers were going to be virtualized. And quite frankly, when I was at Cisco 15 years ago, I was on the innovation team that was planning cloud computing and advising cloud organizations and other organizations how they could build their cloud. So it was a natural evolution for me to go from being a network architect and then an enterprise architect to a cloud architect. And I still go back and forth because I love it. So if you love networking, I would say you've got two options. One would be a network architect and another would be a cloud architect. Going from a network engineer to a network architect would involve more learning design and planning than it would focus on implementation. So it's a little different training there, actually a lot different training. But if you like cloud computing, you're halfway there. So I can say that we had Joe Millen work for us, come over to us. And Joe was a CCIA like me, and it took me less than a month to get Joe Millen to go from a network architect over at Cisco to a cloud or senior solutions architect over at AWS, because the similarities are the same. But networking is half the way. What do network architects typically need to learn? Well, network architects like Mark and I typically didn't work on load balancers because we were focusing on networking. So that's networking, but not. Network architects typically don't know DNS because that's sysadmin work, not networking work for the most part, believe it or not. So, you know, you're a network architect, now you want to be a cloud architect, you got to learn that DNS thing. Network architects and networking people typically don't think of servers and server virtualizations unless they did voice. So unless you have a voice background, Cloud Doctor, you'll probably have to learn servers and server virtualization and containers and container orchestration, but that's no big deal. And you can learn that. And then you'll typically have to understand storage area networks, because even though they're networks, you know, we cloud architects, network architects typically didn't get involved in those fiber channel networks when they were there. Now we do fiber channel over IP, so we get a little bit involved, but it's not really our big thing. Now we have to, there's a big understanding of security in cloud architecture, but the good news is most networking people, network architects, network engineers, either one has a good knowledge of access control list and firewalls and IDS, IPS systems and VPN concentrators and next generation firewalls. So I'd say you'd be halfway there. And then the question would be is if you're an engineer, you would need to learn system design. Whereas if you were already a network architect, you wouldn't need that because that's been your training anyway. And then it's just a business piece for becoming an architect. The sales skills, the executive presence, the CXO relevancy, the stakeholder management skills, the vendor management skills, the ability to facilitate and lead meetings, those kind of things. But it's a great first step there, Cloud Doctor, to become a network architect or a cloud architect. The key is what you like more. More opportunity right now in cloud architecture because we've only been through the first phase of the cloud. The first phase of the cloud is what I call the cloud insanity. You know, it was a tech-driven mistake. Everybody said, we're going cloud, we're going cloud, we're going cloud. Now, 70% of organizations that use the cloud kind of got hurt. I mean, the tech worked, that's nothing, but it didn't provide any business value. And they also didn't realize that it was going to cost on average 250% more money on the cloud than it did on the data center, because when people first did it, they knew certifications, but they didn't understand the technology. Because the certifications, here's the name of this thing and how do I configure it. But what they didn't teach people was it was the same 20 and 30-year-old technology that the network and the data center had with fancy marketing names. So people thought they were getting innovation, and they went from what they had to the public cloud, which did offer greater agility, but they didn't sell it on agility. They sold it on cost savings, went to the cloud, increased their cloud bills. So the new phase of cloud architectures, which is what I've been training people for forever because I knew it was coming, was the hybrid multi-cloud. Put all those high performance things in the data center where you can run it better, faster, cheaper, and more secure, and leverage the cloud for its agility and its scalability. And maybe use our data center for 60% of our workloads, maybe use one public cloud provider for 10%, maybe use another public clouder for another 15%. And that way, if a system fails, we're still up and operational. Plus, we also have certain cloud providers that have advantages over others. Microsoft has extreme advantages in the AI world. So if I'm going to go multi-cloud and my use case is better for Microsoft, I might stick that AI in Microsoft. And I might stick some of my infrastructure in Amazon because they've got the biggest infrastructure out there. So I can do best of breed architectures, or I can do ultra high availability architectures, because a single cloud is a single point of failure, no matter how many regions and availability zones people use. And the reason people didn't realize that in the beginning is they didn't understand that the clouds have a common network and a common control plane. So big network problem on a public cloud provider, it can take down the entire global cloud. Security event taking down a cloud provider, and there's lots of security events affecting cloud providers, can take down the global cloud provider. The control plane, which orchestrates everything, goes down in one cloud. The business is left with nothing. Now, if it's a small business, who cares? But what if it's a hospital and all those systems go down and somebody dies? That matters. So any of these things are great. You'll be great in the cloud. You'll be great in the networking. What matters is you do what you love.
I think Mike will agree with me on this. A lot of the feedback that I've received, and that I've received not just from students, but all of my career too, is anyone who's not taken the networking route before, but went into security, unified communications, and these other branches that you have, including any type of sysadmin work, they all been telling me every single time, it goes like, this networking thing is just another beast. I wish I would have learned it first. Now, I know it sounds a little biased coming from us, because that's our passion, to be able to work on routers and switches and these different protocols that help us to facilitate the actual communications across a global scale. But that comes from a lot of people that have first taken a different route. And many of them wish they could have done it the other way around. Generally speaking, what I would recommend to anyone is, if you're looking to pick up a domain or go into a career that is an overlay, if we can use that type of term, an overlay, and has an underlying technology that makes it work, learn the underlying technology first. Okay. And what I mean with that is, if you want to have voice calls, video calls, it has shifted towards running across IP these days. So guess what? Part of your troubleshooting, if you're an engineer, is going to be understanding how that piece functions at the network layer. If you're an architect, guess what you'll have to understand? How my design is being impacted by the underlying technology. So you still have to learn something. Security, where's your threat landscape there? Where does it start off with? Well, most people have physical security relatively locked down. We know data centers have it definitely locked down. So where do they go from next? They work themselves up the ladder, so to say. They now look at hardware. Can they penetrate somehow the hardware at some type of level, or logical level perhaps? Then they'll move up where first? The network. I've seen plenty also of breaches come across just sessions that were established from a PBX, which is a phone system, towards a session border controller. They somehow hijacked that particular session and infiltrated that way. Guess what? you still needed to know the networking piece and not just the security piece or the voice piece again. So I would say cloud computing, what is it built upon? It's built upon data center technology. It's built upon virtualization. And what is the underlying plumbing of all of that besides electricity? It is networking. So I would say at the least, if you can, get fundamental networking understanding. Now, I'm a little biased in the sense that I felt, at least when I did it, I know the same thing when Mike did it, I really enjoyed the way Cisco taught networking.
Yeah.
I really did. I thought it did really well. It's a little bit more skewed now because they're trying to introduce a lot of their own software-defined networking kind of solutions. But aside from that, the fundamentals of it, what is the OSI model? How does it factor in? How can it help me? Why do I need to know spanning tree? Like, for example, in the data center, how prevalent might data center spanning tree be? Well, if I have data center interconnects, I might need to consider that. But aside from that, basics of routing, of switching, you are also learning some basics of security, how to harden your devices. You learn such things as access control lists. Those are all mechanisms that you'll learn at the fundamental networking layer, and that you can still transfer when you get to cloud computing. Why? Because they still exist there. So that will be something that I would ask that you look into eventually to see if that might be something that you can invest a few months first into it. And I guarantee you, you're not going to have the regrets. And then, like Mike said, the journey going forward to becoming a cloud architect is going to be a lot easier than trying to do the actual cloud technologies first and trying to backtrack. And I think, Mike, yesterday, didn't we have a visitor in our Zoom session as well that they said that they had to piggyback on networking?
It's true. Right after we ran our webinar, we had a working cloud architect, and he joined us yesterday for the subnetted workshop, and he said, it's really tough being an architect without knowing networking. And I said, yeah, that's why we train network architects. We were happy to have him there. But, you know, that's the difference. Knowing how something works. And Cisco would actually teach you how the technology works. The cloud providers don't teach any of that in their certification. They just teach how to configure it. Knowing how to configure it is honestly nothing. And why do I say it's nothing? On the CCIE exam, you know what they used to do? They would give you the configuration manual on the test. Yep. And it still had a 90% failure rate. And you know why they gave you the configuration manual? Because they knew that wasn't the challenge. The challenge was knowing what needed to be built. Why did it need to be built? The underlying technology of how it worked. They could still achieve a 90+% failure rate on an exam that most people would spend $20,000 of preparation and read 50,000 pages, because nobody ever had a problem with configuring it. It's the easy thing. It's knowing what and the underlying technology and the performance tuning it is. If you understand how BGP works and all the BGP messages that are sent, and you know how it establishes a connection, and what happens when it sends that first TCP message, and then once it gets response in the session setup, how it goes to an open and then an open send, and how ultimately it transitions into established. And if you understand that finite machine in BGP, and I'm going to get off of it before I terrify people about BGP, it doesn't matter when you're on AWS, whether you're on Azure, whether you're on Google, whether you're on the IBM cloud, the Nutanix cloud, Verizon, AT&T, TELUS, Telefonica, NTT, Centrelink, it's the same BGP. And it doesn't matter if it's a Cisco router or a Juniper router or an AWS router or an Arista router or a Huawei router, because it's the same standards-based protocol. And that's the difference between learning the underlying technology versus how it works and how it works. And the reason I tell everybody that they're not going to learn architecture by doing is people have it in their mind that they're going to get good knowledge by getting hands-on experience. And then I ask people, tell me what happens from the time you actually type www.gocloudcareers.com in your browser. What occurs? How is that TCP message set up between you and the server? Where are the ARPs along the way? What are the router interface lookups? How are the outgoing interface lists added versus packet forwarding that's added? You know, how does the DNS lookup and process work? Where are MAC addresses swapped along an Ethernet connection? How do the routing protocols between you and your destination work? Because you're going to have an interior gateway protocol as well as some exterior gateway protocols. How's all that stuff work? And people don't know. Or I'd say, fine, you just passed a Linux sysadmin test or a Microsoft certified whatever test. Tell me how your PC actually works. Tell me how your CPU works. Tell me how those cores work with each other. Tell me how DRAM goes and connects to the core. Tell me how those PCI lanes in that CPU affect the GPU performance in a machine learning environment. And they won't know. Because that's why we architects are specialized professionals and we require specialized training. Because learning how to does not teach us. And that's why people don't hire construction workers to design hotels. And that's why they don't hire bridge build engineers to build bridges to design the bridges. It's the reason they don't hire airplane pilots to design rockets. How-to knowledge is wonderful. And we need important people that build it. We need the engineers of the world. But it's not what we do as architects. And we must have a very different skill. And that's why the hands-on experience doesn't matter so much for the architect, because what we do is conceptual. We have to understand these concepts. Good question there, Claude Tucker.
Question from Fola Shockey. Who has an easier time transitioning to senior management? Cloud architects or software engineers?
Fola Shockey, I'm going to give the honest truth here, and I wish it wasn't the same. An architect is an executive, and we architects consult to executives, so it's super easy for us to transition. It is, sadly, incredibly hard for software engineers to transition into senior management. I can remember bringing software engineers with us on architecture projects because they know the code better than we do as architects. They're great at it. And I can also remember trying to bring in software engineers into the executive suite, having them escorted out. And I've consulted to numerous clients, and they're like, Mike, could you go build a team of code monkeys and go figure out what we need to build here? And I'm like, what do you mean code monkeys? They're like, they're the software engineers. I would never use a term like code monkeys. But the executives see those hands-on techies, those hands-on coding people as technicians, no matter how important they are. Software engineers are smart, strong, highly valuable people. But honestly, they just don't get the respect of senior management. They don't see they're there. In much the same manner as I have a friend, Ted. Ted can build anything. Ted is a genius with his hands. My brother is the most mechanical person I've ever met in my life. He can rebuild cars, rebuild houses, do electrical wiring. This guy is a rock star. My brother, Mike, yeah, I know. Greek people have lots of brothers and people named a similar name. But anyway, so my brother can build anything. I wish I could because I have so much respect for it. But most people have a lot more respect for the architect that designs the hotel than the construction workers that are building the hotel. They're equally important people because the architect builds a blueprint. And without those construction workers, we've got nothing other than blueprints. So those construction workers are very valuable. Unfortunately, they don't get the respect and they're not seen at the same level, no matter how important they are. So that's why software engineers have a very hard time making it to the top. I actually worked in an organization. It was a pretty powerful organization. And I remember asking, what does one have to do to transition from an engineer to a sales role? And the company actually said, we don't allow our engineers to transition to sales roles or these bigger leadership roles. And I asked them why. And they said, because they're focused on the tech. And in sales roles, we need people focused on business. In these leadership roles, we've got to have people focused on business. So I thought that was pretty horrible. And I trained lots of those engineers to move into bigger roles by finding ways to rebrand them and things. But it's a pretty sad thing. The closer you are to tech, the less you earn as a rule and the less respect you get. The closer you are to that business side. So you're a cloud architect, you get a lot more respect. You're an enterprise architect, you get a lot more respect. It's not the way it should be. It really isn't. But the architect can earn 2 to 3 times more in their career. The architect has more respect. And because the architect is already an executive and has to have so much executive presence, business acumen, leadership skills, sales skills, and sales skills get you promoted too. Because they increase the people that are willing to do things and the ability to exercise influence. There's just no comparison, Fola Shockey, between an architect's future and an engineer's future. I didn't say it was right, because I don't believe it's right. But I'm all about how to get people to their ultimate goal. And quite frankly, that if you've got the soft skills, the executive skills, your opportunities are just so much greater.
Yeah, we have this discussion, Mike and I, quite a few times because we both have had the experience of engineering. Mike a little shorter than I have, but we both have it. So we know what it took to even just to get there, and what we many times, stay to be a fundamental or just the starting elementary kind of level. We're not trying to make the CCI sound like it's nothing, but at that level, you kind of really learn that you don't know much at all.
Yeah.
It sounds really odd for us to say that, but it is true. The more you start learning, the more you find out that there's so much more to learn. There's so many more peaks to climb. So, and then business is all different. That's where also you're humbled by the multifaceted approach. And that's why we're always relatively heartbroken when we see that engineers and other people that are hands-on are not respected in the industry.
Yeah.
It takes a ridiculous amount of effort to be able to accomplish something. I mean, I've had this discussion before with people that they had their CCNA, they moved on, and they forgot what it was like to even start. We had our subnetting workshop yesterday, and it's really nice to see, and we really appreciate it that everybody has to start somewhere, and that a lot of concepts that our brain fools us into thinking, hey, they were a piece of cake. They were not a piece of cake.
No.
And we want to be honest and realistic about what people put into to be able to climb the career ladder, to get that job. Even as architects, many people don't understand the work that goes into becoming an architect, right? You might not be sitting at the command line of a router, of a firewall. You might not be actually sitting at a vSphere type of management system, or even looking at like a hypervisor when it comes to virtualization. You might not be configuring the actual storage switch or any of that. But guess what? You're still going to have to learn what it takes for that technology to work, maybe at a higher level than an engineer, but also how it interworks between everything. That takes effort, and that also builds competency learning these things, and it builds experience. And that's what people many times forget. So which transition is easier? If I took out the cloud, just kept the architect, I would say architect.
Yeah.
Software engineer, I'll be blunt with you, I've never been one. I have great respect for those people because they do number crunching that I can't even think of to begin. So that's just my 2 cents. And again, we're just heartbroken that these type of people don't get more recognition for their hard work.
It's true, because they work so hard.
Yeah.
And everybody's important, just as important. We all fulfill a role to make things work.
Yeah.
So if you've got some questions, ask them. Otherwise, Mark and I have lots of things to do. While we give you guys another minute or two to ask a question, let me go over the final things that I really wanted to talk about. We have a completely free AWS Advanced Networking Bootcamp coming in the end of the month. Sign up. We will make it easy for you to understand. And the reason we'll do so is we have expert network architects teaching it. We are not a certification company where somebody takes a certification in a topic they don't understand and then teach it. We've got 3 Cisco certified internet experts, 1 Cisco certified network professional. The team has over 60 years network engineering and network architect experience. And they know it so well, every one of us, and I'm going to teach it too because I love networking. Mark's going to get involved too. That will be able to take the complex, make it simple, and you will understand it. And it's free. So come learn from network experts, and it's free. I'd also like to remind everybody that tomorrow we have our How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. People will come from all over the world. It'll be on Zoom. We'll go over the cloud architect role. We'll go over what we do. We'll talk about how to get that first job, how to bypass those HR people that'll auto-reject you. We'll talk about what certifications will help you get an interview versus which ones won't, why certifications won't get you hired, and we'll cover the list of every skill, every business skill, every leadership skill, every tech skill, every architecture skill. And whether you train with us or you go to business schools and hire executive coaches and hire others, you'll know everything that you need. And it's free. And it'll be on Zoom. So you think you're ready? You want to, and Mike, am I ready to interview for an architect job? I'll give you a 5-question mini interview and you will know right there whether you're ready or you're not. Been certified for a year and you're not getting hired? We'll tell you why. We can give you a little mini interview and a test, and we'll see what you're great at versus what you're not. And when you're armed with information and you know what you need to do, it's so easy to get there. So we'll give you that clarity. We'll give you that roadmap that's free. Truth be told, we also have a free document that you probably should read if you want to come to that. I mean, you don't have to read it. We'll go over it every way, but if you want to read it in advance, it's in there on how to become a cloud architect. It's another free document we wrote. And in the description of this video, there should be many other things to help you in your career, things to help you on an interview, things to help you earn more. They're all free in the description of this video. So Mark and I are going to get back to work. It doesn't look like there's any more questions for us, and that is totally fine. We will be back next week to answer career questions. See you tomorrow on the How to Get Your First Architect Job webinar. And if you want to become an AI architect, don't miss out on this opportunity. We extended our 50% a little longer. Take care, everyone.
Thank you all for joining.